Hello everyone, A.SAVA here from A.SAVA-custom. I will leave you my Facebook page in the description below. This is going to be an English spoken tutorial about how to finish your rod, about the final coating on your rod, as a perfect finish as possible, at least the way I do it. I will go through all the items I use for this purpose, so you know what to expect. I mainly use a power wrapper. This is an American tackle power wrapper. It's similar to the Pacific Bay. I will tell you when I set up the rod why I prefer this kind of setup. I usually use disposable cups for mixing the resin. The epoxy for the finish I use is Threadmaster. This is the one I prefer the most. The high build version, I always use graded syringes to extract the exact amount I need for finishing a rod. You will need a lighter. I recommend you use windproof lighter because they have a more powerful explosion than the regular lighters, which you will need to burst the bubbles in your finish. Disposable brushes. These are, I think, American Tackle or CRB disposable brushes. I prefer the thinner ones, I think it's 1/8 of an inch. I prefer the disposable ones because as many times as I've tried to use a regular brush, I always forget to clean them, therefore make them disposable as many times as I've used them. Therefore I use the disposable brushes. What I recommend having is desk light with an incandescent light bulb. I think hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. Meaning when you turn on the light you have a little heat coming off the light bulb. This one I use for, it helps me sometimes to level the finish on the portion where I place the decals or the stickers of the rod. If I forgot something, you will find about it in the process of finishing your final coating of the rod, of the wraps and of the decals. Stay tuned and let's see what I have in store for you. Now to discuss a little bit about the wrapper and why I prefer this kind of wrapper. First of all, you have both drying and wrapping possible on the same wrapper. You just have to switch the O-ring from one motor to the other. And this is very simple to do. Second of all, I prefer the cheaper chuck, the cheaper version of the Pacific Bay or American Tackle Company power wrapper, because it helps me adjust the blank. If you have a self-centering aluminum chuck like the Alps upgrade or the Pacific Bay, don't buy the Pacific Bay because when you turn it, it actually opens up compared to the Alps one, which will always stay closed. As I said, I prefer this one because it's not perfectly self-centering, and if you don't build your own grips, and if you're not able to latte them on the blank itself, it's very likely you will end up with a rod that doesn't have a perfectly centered grip on it. If you use a pre-made grip, it's almost impossible to make it so it's perfectly centered on the blank. It's close to impossible. You might get it right, but from my experience, I don't really think you can get it right. Therefore, I use this cheap version of the chuck, and I really like it like this, because if, for example, I have an off-centered grip, I just close this one, tighten it, and secure it. You will see the rod goes up and down when I start to rotate it, meaning it's not centered. Therefore, you won't be able to get a perfect finish. And I'm all about perfection on my rods, therefore I need the finish to be perfect. It's my reputation on the line. And what do we do now if the blank goes up and down when I turn it? You just rotate it in the chuck, backwards, forwards, until you get an almost perfect rotation, meaning the blank is perfectly centered, not offsetted, and you see it turns very smoothly and it's not going up and down anymore. Therefore I can do a perfect finish like this. This is what's going to help you do a perfect finish on a power wrapper. It's not easy to make these tutorials by myself. Okay, as I said, I use graded syringes. All epoxy manufacturers usually recommend you use at least 3 cc's of each part. I don't do that because it's a waste of resin, and I usually go up to 2, maybe 2.5. I will go with 2.5 just to make sure this time, but between 2 and 2.5 is just enough epoxy to get perfect results. As you see, after I turn the resin tube upside down, I let the bubble float up, the air bubble, and I try to pull as much resin as I can without bubbles getting into it. This is very important. Take your time. As you can see, I have 2 bubble-free syringes with both parts of the resin, hardener and the resin. I will use this mixing cup. I already used it once, but it's perfect for a new mix. I usually keep it in an angle when I pour in the first part of epoxy, of resin or hardener. I don't know which one is which, and I don't even care. Don't hurry, because if you don't, it's more likely you won't get bubbles in your finish. For mixing, I use toothpicks, pointy toothpicks. I usually mix for 5 minutes, therefore I will ask Siri to count down 5 minutes. Hey Siri, set timer to 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes and counting.
It's a hands-free operation, and now you always have to rotate the cup. I usually mix just in half of the cup, so I go against the wall of the cup and then come back through the middle. So this is the motion you should do, and always rotate the cup for the next 5 minutes. 99% of the times I don't even get one bubble in the cup. It's more difficult to do when I try to explain it and film it at the same time, because I'm not really able to look at the cup. I'm actually looking at the screen while I mix in the cup. After about 1 minute of mixing, you will see the resin clears up. I think you may have noticed that when I started mixing, it started getting cloudier and cloudier, but it clears up after 1 minute, and in 5 minutes you will always have a perfect mix. This is the rate I mix at, and this is the motion you should use to mix the epoxy. Okay, mixing is complete. I have almost 0 bubbles. As you can see, I have already coated this part, because I usually put the stickers on after a first coat of resin. It makes the sticker or the decal invisible to the eye after I put the second coat of resin. I usually do this step first, because when you apply the epoxy on larger surfaces, it's better applied at the beginning of the process, and try to get it as straight as possible. Okay, and I'll come back later to check this out. Now let's go to the guide. This is the larger guide on the rod. I usually start from the bottom of the guide, from the bottom of the wrap, and work my way up, because I want the resin to seep in through the thread near the guide foot. I go up to the leg of the guide and try not to smudge the resin on the blank as well, because I want the resin to seep in right at the foot of the guide. Otherwise, you will have a squeaky guide when fishing. This resin is a high build, and it sets up pretty quickly compared to other resins. And I usually help it. You will see the thread darkening. I usually help it with this lighter, windproof lighter, and I usually use explosions. You see the resin liquefied perfectly, it's like water. And you will notice at the base of the guide, the base of the foot of the guide, that the resin has already seeped through the thread and it came out at this end. Okay, and now I use the power wrapper. I remove the excess resin that I have and try to straighten this out as much as possible. At the smaller guides, if you leave the resin enough, it will seep through by itself, but with this larger guide, that doesn't happen because there's a lot of room between the thread and the leg of the guide. There's an air pocket that needs to be filled in with resin. If you don't do this, you will have squeaky guides. It's not a structural issue, but you will have a squeaky guide, which is no fun. I do the same process for the rest of the guides and leave it drying for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on how hot is the inside of my workshop, until it starts to gellify. It starts to harden. I will show you what happens if you don't correct this after 20, 30, 40 minutes. You will see the threads sticking out from under the resin, and I hate that, and it has a different shape than the shape I prefer to have. For example, if the resin starts to harden, starts to gellify, it doesn't seep in all the cracks, and you can see that this one's darker already than the one I just applied. I usually help it with the lighter, but I keep it away so the flame actually doesn't touch the epoxy itself. It never touches the epoxy. It's just enough to liquefy it. I remove some excess resin, epoxy. If I see something, I clean it up. There was a little smudge on the edge of the aluminum trim part. So I help it with the flame all the time. In that manner, all the resin seeps into the thread, and it makes for a longer lasting finish. Okay, I've noticed some edges where the sticker is. I'm trying to show them to you, but they're barely visible and I don't like them. And I think they're going to be felt when touching it. I have a dust particle here. I will remove this one. And try to straighten out the resin on the decal. If I straighten this out right now and leave it, it's not that hardened yet. I usually soften the resin a little bit and try to keep a steady hand, something like this. Once more. And now in order for this one to set up more smoothly, as I said, I have a lamp. I put the lamp at a certain distance. Put it from this side this time. I usually put it just over it. I'll try to fix the lighting a little bit. Okay. And leave it at the distance, just enough in order to feel a little warmth on the hand. That will straighten out your coating on the decal. I only use this on the decal. I don't have to use this on the guides. It doesn't help. But here it helps because if you have a wavy finish, it helps to straighten it out. Okay, it's straightened out quite nice. Now I'll have to go over the entire rod and revisit all the guides on the rod. I won't revisit this one. This is the way it's going to stay. The resin started to harden, so it's almost gel-like now. It's gelified, if I can say that. And now it's the perfect time to check out the guides. Switch back to wrapping mode. You will see, I'll try to show you, in this top part here, I don't know if it's visible enough, the thread has come through the resin. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. On my rods, I like the wrap to be perfectly encastrated in the resin. Therefore, it's going to last for years to come. Now I heat up the resin a little bit. And with the help of okay, it should be perfect now. It will level itself out even better. But now if I leave it like this, this is about the way it's going to remain. So the epoxy at this stage is not going to change shape anymore because of the rotation of the blank. And this is where I want it to get. I will leave it like this and check it out in 10-20 minutes again to see if I'm right about it. If I'm right, I should get a perfect finish. Okay, now I go ahead and check the rest of the guides, and I think it's a wrap for today. Okay guys, this is it for today. This is the way I apply the coating to the rods I build. On the rods you can actually see on Facebook, on my Facebook page. If you haven't seen my Facebook page, don't forget to check it out. It's in the description. You will see some amazing projects there. I try to diversify a lot with my project builds. Hope this tutorial helps you in your future builds. Every resin has its own limitations, its own agenda, to say so. This is the resin I use. If you want to use a different type of resin, it's very difficult to get it perfectly on your first rod, so it will take some time to adjust with the resin you will work with the epoxy you will work with, and it took me quite a few years to develop the tricks I've shown you, and I've been using this resin for almost 10 years now. So Threadmaster is still my go-to resin. I've tried others, but they didn't cut the grade for me. If you enjoyed these tutorials, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, try to leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. A.SAVA here from A.SAVA-custom rods. See you next time on the next tutorial. Have fun building some rods.